What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Paradox Kingdom. My name is Steven Hernandez, and I'm actually here with a good friend of mine, longtime friend of mine that we haven't been able to talk and chat as much as I would like to, or we both would like to. But his name is Marcus Velasquez. I'll let you introduce yourself. I was going to call you Jitta, but for those who don't know, and we'll talk about that too. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, man. My name is Marcus Alexander Velasquez, humble servant, and got a lot of things. Known Stephen from mostly Bible college and hip hop, which I know we'll get into in the episode, but lots of things, man. Love Jesus, musician, own my own business, lots of things. So happy to be here, excited, humbled, and excited to get into this.
Yeah. I was hoping you made sure to mention your business as well, because you can't forget that you're doing some amazing things with that. Um, but so recently I posted a video about a conversation I had with my cousin, and he asked me the question, "What would it take for me to no longer believe in God?" And then and so I posted a video about that because initially my answer was there was nothing that could make me reject God.
Sure.
And so that's kind of what this the Marcus, he actually posted a comment saying like, I would love to share my story, and I think that that's something that I would love for everyone to hear too. So I'll start it off and then I'll let you jump into your story, just kind of how we met, and you can jump in as well. But and I wanted to share a little bit of my story as well as we get into that. I'm not going to share everything for those who know, and if not, I'll do it eventually. But um I got saved when I was 18. I was a battle rapper, smoking, drinking, partying, all that. I got saved, but then I quickly backslid. So my heart was there, but I was still 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So I backslid for about 2 years. And then I came back to God. I went to Bible college about a year later. You were there my second year, right? That's when you came in?
Yeah, you were 1 year ahead of me.
Yeah, and that's whenever I met Marcus, and so I was a Christian rapper, he was a Christian rapper, and so it just clicked. We went on tour together.
Yes, we did.
I don't know if you see it. Yeah, I just put it back there. I was cleaning out some stuff in my garage,
Like
but
I see it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we did some dope tours in the Bay Area, mostly led by Marcus, and we also did some amazing training and stuff. So it wasn't just concerts, but it was like digging in and helping people to be equipped and beat a body. Um, and so that's where I met him. And so I want him to kind of tell his story, the pre, or however you wanna share it. But I just want to say that kind of like that's where we met. He was already doing his thing. I had just I was about a year in of really following God and things like that. So there was still a lot that I was learning as far as like the Christian side. I was rapping for a long time before, but yeah. Go ahead and take it away, and I'm gonna jump in and ask you some questions of things that maybe I didn't even know about.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, didn't know that we both came to Jesus at 18. That's when I got saved as well, and we do have a lot in common, man. Because music is a big part of our stories.
Hmm.
Music is primarily the reason I came. I would say the reason I came to church, not
Mm,
necessarily Jesus. I met a Christian rapper in Chicago. His name was Lamp, Lamp, which stood for Lighted Apostle Ministering Peace. I'll never forget his
mm,
name.
that's dope.
And I saw him performing at a church one time. My father got saved before me, and he was the main reason of the influence over me coming to church and eventually knowing Jesus.
That's cool.
But at this church, there was a Christian rapper there, and I saw him perform, dude. I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw people shouting. They wanted pictures with him afterwards. They wanted his autograph. And I saw that and I was like, that's what I want. So 100% started because of pride. I wanted to be
Mm,
on stages. I wanted the attention. So that's what kind of got me into church. And then throughout that experience, I actually had encounters with God and fell in love with God.
mm,
But yeah, I would say that more than anything, and I'm grateful to that brother to this day, and to the day I die, because he believed in me. So
mm.
like I
Oh,
didn't,
that's dope.
yeah, I didn't have any, like I really honestly I wasn't even raised on hip hop. My first love was 90s R&B. Not a lot of
Okay.
people know that. Yeah, so even when I work on music now, most of my choruses tend to be like R&B singy type choruses. So that's where that comes from. But yeah, he believed in me. the first thing that actually grabbed his attention was we were in his car. I'll never forget. And he was playing the intro to Ludacris's Chicken and Beer. And it was like super fast rap. And I did it. I repeated it word for word. And he looked at me. He's like, I didn't know you could do that. And I was like,
Yeah.
I guess so. I mean, it's one thing to repeat someone else's work. It's another thing to come up with your own work. But anyways, that's what grabbed his attention. He had an independent label at the time. I was never officially like signed. I was just, I don't know, I hung around. But my first experience with music, he took me to my first real studio. But like I said, more than anything, he believed in me. But yeah, and then I was performing all over Chicago. Every youth group that would open their doors to me, I was performing at. There was one church in particular called Metro Praise, and I was rapping for their youth group every Friday, almost every single Friday. Like I became a staple of their youth group, and I wasn't even a member of the church at the time. So
Okay. I initially thought you got saved in the church, so you didn't get saved in Metro Place. Okay, that's cool to know. I was curious about that. All right.
Yeah, so the link in there was through the youth group. So Pastor Joe, if you remember him, he initially
Yeah.
was the youth pastor at another church out here called Belmont Assembly of God. That's how I got introduced to him. He started Metro Praise, and that was my connection to Metro Praise.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, performing just about every single Friday for the youth. And then, if do you remember Anthony Freeman?
Oh yeah.
So one of the founders of SUM, a big time mentor to Pastor Joe. So one of the Fridays that I was
Oh, that's right.
performing, one of the Fridays that I was performing at a youth group, he was there. He loved my music. He said he was impressed by it, and he asked me if I ever considered Bible college. I was like, I didn't even know Bible college existed.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, so of course, this is what he told me, and this is the second time that my pride hooked me. And he said, Bible college is the difference of your ministry lasting 5 to 10 years to 20 to 30 years. Sign me up. So then legit, that was my introduction to SUM, School of Urban Missions. I don't remember the exact time frame, but yeah, shortly thereafter, I ended up moving to Oakland for 3.5 years. That's where we met, and yeah, that's kind of gets us to that point. I know we got more questions beyond that, but I don't remember how you and I specifically met. Obviously, it wasn't a big campus. There wasn't a lot of people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe we were in a class together. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember how we met. I remember the first time seeing you, I think you were performing Dímelo. And I was like, that's dope, because I don't speak Spanish and I would always love to do it. You did reggaeton, so I was like, oh, that's dope. But I don't remember how we actually met. I think it was just people like, oh yeah, you got to meet him. And then, like you said, the campus was stupid small. We were in the men's dorm, so it was everybody hung around with each other type of thing.
Yeah,
but yeah, so now we're both in Bible college. So I've been there for a year. So I'm kind of, for the most part, I'm more solid. When I got saved, when I rededicated my life, I was like, all right, I'm done with the world and everything that has to do with it. And it was very different than it is today. Way different. Christian hip hop was very different, because if you weren't Calvinist, you weren't getting put on. If you rapped over a secular beat, you were shunned. Like it was crazy, right? Like if you think about where Christian hip hop is today, it was very different. So I didn't have a producer, and I didn't, and I, because I came from like mixtapes and stuff, I would just take secular people's beats and then rap Jesus Christ over them, and make my own type of thing. So that's kind of where I was, and then you came in and you're a producer. You make all these dope beats, you record yourself and stuff like that. So it was a dope connection.
I forgot till this moment that I produced one of the songs for you.
I mean, almost my whole EP, I think you produced.
Dang, I remember I'm Free.
Yeah, I'm Free. Don't Give Up. The Anthem.
Holy cow! Yeah, that's right.
More Than Entertainment. I think my whole EP.
Wow.
Yeah, and so
that's
it's
pretty
funny
cool, because my production days are long behind me.
Yeah, I mean, you still got fire. I know if you get to it, you definitely wreck some stuff, for sure. But yeah, even that was funny, because a lot of my songs I wrote, and then you created a beat that was not similar, but it was similar enough where I didn't have to change everything that I wrote to tailor it. So you did basically a lot of customized work too. So we get there, we start connecting, and then you can You can tell them what it was like being in SUM versus, I guess, the regular church or regular Bible colleges. Like, what was it like? Because for those, as you're going to share your story of of walking away from the church and things like that, but so people don't think you were just like this regular person, your regular Christian type of thing. But we were going hard for God, right? For those who don't know, so share about what that was like. You could talk even about Mardi Gras, but
Oh, like the overall Bible college experience?
SUM experience, yeah. Like
Yeah.
what did our life look like at SUM? Christians, Christian rappers, because like you said, a lot of us were coming from that world. We were hooked in because of pride, but we weren't. But we were serving. Like SUM is serving involved. Like we were really serving. We had opportunities to be on big stages and stuff like that too. But at the same time, we were in the trenches as well.
Yeah. I think overall, happy to go into details, but I think the overarching theme of what I took away from SUM was taking scripture extremely seriously
Mm,
and taking the practical implementation of it very seriously as well. So it was way more than your casual church goer or, a creaster that would go on Christmas and Easter or, might have John 3:16 and a couple other super popular verses memorized, as opposed to us going having so I actually remember, if you remember, I'm sure you do, Dr. Searle.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
we
Double
had
dot.
one quiz of his I'll never take, and I still have it to this day. A quick little pat on the back. He gave us some kind of quiz, and it was just memorize scripture, and it was
Mm,
like
that's
50,
cool.
I think, different questions or something. And I remember studying the night before, which I think a lot of us got in the habit of waiting till the night before to study stuff. Yo, but I crammed so much stuff in my brain, bro, and
Yeah.
I got a
Oh,
100%
nice.
quiz to the point where he wrote "show off" on the top of the paper. That's why I still have it. I love it.
That's funny.
But yeah, and then yeah, it was a 3-year program, and then super heavy on street ministry, going out and hitting the streets and being the church and taking the church to the streets. Um, literally setting up speakers on street corners and street preaching. And then to the point where 2 out of the 3 years of the programming, we would actually have to fly down to New Orleans during the Mardi Gras
Mm.
festival and street preach. And let me tell you, it was an extremely tough experience for me in particular.
Mm.
So I struggle with anxiety. Like I've actually been formally diagnosed with it. So anxiety and confrontation do not
Mm.
mix. That's oil and water right there. So honestly, street evangelism, I think, is one of the most confrontational things you can do in this world. You're literally starting a conversation with a stranger, you know nothing about this person, and you start a conversation on one of the most sensitive,
Yeah.
serious topics that anybody could ever talk about. And it's funny because that actually led to my business, which we can talk about later. But my experience on the streets, bro, like other than me having, many anxiety attacks every time I tried to start a conversation, my whole
Mm.
thing, bro, was always the icebreaker. It was like, how do I
Mm.
start a conversation? Because once it starts, I
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
flow. Once we're in there and deep and then I get comfortable, we're good. But
What
it was always like, how do I start? And
what were some icebreakers that you did that you kind of remember?
oh man. So one out I remember, I actually, it's funny, I went from super anxiety, anxious, and having issues with confrontation to, I don't know if you remember, I actually taught an evangelism training session while I was still at the school, which was a huge honor. And one of the things I came up with one time, because we often would visit like the bus stops and the bus
Yeah.
stations. So I remember one time there was some kids by a bus stop, so I'm creative, you know what I mean? It's like, let's just have some fun. So I walk up to them close enough where they recognize me, and I'm looking at the bus stop, which had like the route with the different stops. So I'm looking at it as if I'm looking for directions. So I was like, hey, do you guys know how to get to heaven? And that was my like favorite opener because they were like
That's dope.
expecting that. I thought I was going to ask about directions on how to get home or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was about creative ways of starting it. And then there's some times where you just get to the point, if you were
Yeah,
to die right now, would you go to heaven or
yeah.
hell? So it was it was kind of having these prepared openers, but also, being sensitive to the Holy Spirit. And
Yeah.
sometimes God would drop something completely unique in that moment on us. But yeah, SUM was one of the toughest things I've ever done. It was literally trial by fire.
Yeah.
I've grown tremendously from it. It did help me understand more of my calling, how God has individually and uniquely equipped me for certain things. So, talking about the music as well. So, the tour that we went on, I know you know this, but for your audience, we called it Basic. It was rooted in the scripture that talks about the simplicity that's in Christ. So, something simple, it's basic. And we were in the Bay Area, so we spelled
Yeah.
it Baysyk. So yeah, we did a tour. I don't remember how many churches we stopped at, but that was super dope. And again, going back to taking scripture so seriously, is that, like you mentioned, it wasn't just a performance thing. We actually went through training. We turned a lot of our songs into actual training material, so that when we stop at a church or a youth group and we perform, we could actually leave training material behind afterwards, so people could use our music and our music as a platform to teach beyond after we leave. So yeah, I remember even we included evangelism training. One part is kind of like this
Yeah.
overall like weekend type thing. It was really cool, man. We were onto something.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it was definitely dope, and I don't know many other places, even to this day, that do something like that. Um, I forgot what I was gonna ask you. I was gonna talk something about, we were talking about like anxiety. You were talking about like just evangelism and talking to strangers. It'll probably come back to me. But yeah, no, that's dope. SUM was a great experience. It was definitely things to get you out of the out of that shell. I used to walk up to random people and just rap for them, and that was kind of like my opening. Actually, oh, that's what I was gonna mention as well. So I don't, you remember Raymond, right? He was there for a small period of time.
Rain.
Um,
Did you go by any other
he
names?
graduated ahead of us. Texas. He was he rapped as well. I think he may have been gone by the time you were there, because he graduated before us. But anyways, he was on top of a van, and he asked me that question: if you were to die right now, would you go to heaven? So that's kind of how, like, what started my journey to God, was that simple question.
That's
And so
dope.
I've used that many times, especially when you're in places like Oakland and people really might die. You know what I mean? But also, you may not see them again. But those icebreakers are dope. Those are very good things that we need to be doing more of. All right, so we fast forward. So we're in SUM. You're doing your thing. We went on a concert. I graduate. I was there for a year. I was just working, and then I moved to Massachusetts. So what happens? Or you can talk about. I don't know where you want to start off now, but kind of start to your story where you actually left, or however you want to call it. I don't know if you want to call it falling away, left, whatever
Yeah,
you.
I don't know if I've ever really defined it.
Yeah,
But yeah, happy to talk about it. So, throughout, since day one of me being a Christian, and this was even before being a Christian, I struggled with an addiction that was really, and I'm going to name it just because, again, like I like sharing my story, because you never know who can benefit from hearing the
absolutely.
story. And especially if it's something that God has helped me over, well, he didn't help me overcome, he took it away.
Yeah.
Um, it can somebody else and give hope. You know what I mean? So, anyways, I struggled with the pornography addiction for over 15 years. And that was before I became a Christian. Didn't go away when I became a Christian. So it was always something behind the scenes that I struggled with. And although I admitted it to a very select few people and like mentors at the time, it was kind of something I hid. So one thing I learned, honestly, is that it is very easy to play the part of a Christian,
Mm,
because it's
talk
easy
about that.
to look a certain way, say the right things, stand, sit, and kneel when appropriate. You can kind of learn the culture of church and learn how to emulate
Mm,
it. And
yeah.
unless people really know you and are digging deep and asking the tough questions and giving real accountability, people would never know. And I lived that for many, many years. So although I was, like you said, Jitta, for those who don't know, that was my old stage name. It stood for Jesus is the Answer. So it came to the point where Jitta was almost an alternate personality for me. I
Mm.
presented a certain image on stage, but I was doing other things behind the scenes. And it wasn't like it wasn't a struggle. It wasn't something that I was proud of. I was ashamed of it. It was something I wanted to change. I literally did everything that at the time I believe a Christian was supposed to do. I exhausted all my resources, again, that I had available to me at the time. So what was very discouraging was at the time I reached out to a lot of people that I looked up to, mentors, and people that just that I looked up to, and I kept receiving the same answer over and over: pray and fast, pray and
Mm.
fast, pray and
Yeah.
fast. I'm doing that. I literally, Stephen, I kid you not, I did a 19-day water fast before,
Wow.
seeking the face of God, wanting this thing to be taken away, and it didn't go away. I
Yeah.
even did Christian counseling as well. Didn't help, and so, anyways, that was all throughout my Christian walk. That was all throughout my SUM experience. And then after SUM, I moved back home to Chicago. Still followed me there. Was unfortunately the reason behind the demise of my first marriage. So that actually is what led to our divorce. And it's so what happened is I still remember when my ex asked me to leave the house. That was like that was my rock bottom. That's when something really clicked, and I was like, crap. I need to get a hold of this thing. Something needs to get figured out. So I ended up that same weekend booking a my very first therapy appointment, but with a completely, quote unquote, secular therapist, non-Christian therapist. I just went to this guy, and what was crazy is I was at the time I had 10 years of being a Christian and seeking the face of God, doing everything a Christian's supposed to do, moving across country, going to a Bible college, making music for Jesus, touring, doing all the things we just talked about.
Yeah.
And I begged God for this healing and I didn't get it. And I kid you not, in 2 sessions of secular, quote unquote, secular therapy without non-Christian therapists, in 2 sessions, which is 2 hours, I started seeing change in my life.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, something's not adding up here.
Yeah.
So I am an extremely logical person to a fault at times, and I at face value I just took the information in front of me. I was like, okay, I have 10 years of serving God, like everything I said, moving cross country, making music, getting Bible college degree, all these other things, begging and pleading, and I didn't get the change that I wanted. 2 sessions of an secular, ungodly, non-Christian environment, and I start seeing change. I was like, so one path worked, or one path
Mm.
worked, one path didn't work. So one path must be true, and one path must be false. So
Interesting.
that
Yeah.
wasn't a fair conclusion and judgment and assumption at the time, but that's where my mindset was at the time. So
Mm.
it wasn't an immediate, this is crap, I'm going to just stop being a Christian, whatever. It was just an overtime of reading Bible less and less, praying less and less,
Mm.
attending church less and less. And, for a while, I was claiming the title of agnostic. And I saw an interview, and I believe it was Ricky Gervais, and he was talking about that title about agnostic, and he was like, "Oh, it's this pretty fancy word. It's like people trying to play the line because they don't want to go which way." He's like, "If you're an atheist, you're an atheist." So I was like, "All right, I guess I'm an atheist then." So for 3 years, I held the title of atheist, and I did make comments here and there, but more, I would say, I don't know, 80, 90% plus. I was still very respectful of those who had faith, who belonged to some sort of religious system. So I never went like completely overboard where I was like shaming others. I know I did make a couple Facebook posts, or I shared a video that was like questioning why people believe in God. I did make a comment one time about like being set free from religion. So I know I did make those comments, but it's not, I didn't go, like my lifestyle didn't become anti-religion.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
was more like, that's just part of my past. And so what's interesting too is that my focus really focused on therapy, because therapy was this new tool that was introduced to me. I started seeing change and healing from it. So I morphed into more of like positive music. Um,
Oh, okay, okay.
overall like positive mindset of like self-help and healing and digging deep and facing your traumas and finding out the root cause of issues, which in is a very very real and needed part of life. But that became my focus. My music, I changed my name to my first and middle name, which was Marcus Alexander. My brand was Share the Positivity. My website was sharethepositivity.com. Anytime I put up a social media post, it was hashtag Share the Positivity. That became my brand. So that happened for about 3 years. And then I wrote a song called One Step at a Time. And it was like a motivational song. And I was, want to make new, different music. I don't want to repeat the same song over and over. So I was like, man, it would be dope if I could get a motivational speaker, like to do like a 30-second intro or something on this track. So I reached out to my father. I asked him if he knew anybody. He told me about this gentleman whose name was Scott Black, and he owned a leadership development company. So it wasn't advertised as a Christian training, but he was a Christian and he dropped a lot of scripture in the training. But
Yeah.
again, because I was so focused on mental health and growth and therapy, I was like, oh, I love this. Let me eat it up. Yeah, and what's crazy too is at the time, right up to that event, God was stripping things out of my life without me even knowing it. I got a
Mm.
call from my boss one Monday, and he called me and he's like, I don't know how to tell you this. He is like, but I can't pay you this week. And I was like, excuse me? So literally overnight, went to zero money, quickly depleted savings. I was driving Uber and I hated it. I was selling things in my apartment just to make rent. And this offer of attending this leadership development training came up, and the gentleman even offered it to me for free. It was
Mm.
in Minneapolis. So he said, it's normally $2,000. Just come through. You can be my guest. You just got to make it there yourself. So I had to drive up there. And I literally told him, I have nothing else to do. So
Mm.
I will be there. So God removed any potential use or anything I could use to brush it off.
That's
So
cool.
I went there, had an amazing experience. God definitely got a hold of me. And then that following, so it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday event. Got back home, and that Sunday, 3 years later, was the first time I prayed. Um,
Mm.
I ended up joining that leadership development organization. I became an assistant trainer with them. And it was just, when it came to that point of joining that organization, there were so many things in my life that kind of just came together. All my skill sets were being perfectly utilized in this thing. And I felt like God showed me a vision of someone behind the scenes orchestrating and putting these
That's
pieces
cool.
together. And it was like I would have been a fool in that moment to deny that there's someone behind the scenes orchestrating stuff. And that
Mm.
Sunday, it's the first time I had prayed in 3 years, and yeah, eventually gave my life back to God. So
Yeah,
that,
that's
I wouldn't call it a straight up abandonment of God or
mm.
any other term. I would say the root cause more than anything else was confusion. And
Yeah.
that is an excellent tactic of the enemy, is confusion. And God is not the author of confusion, but confusion is one hell of a tactic, man, because
Yeah.
it'll distort things, it'll distort your view, your perspective, and that's exactly what happened to me. So thankfully, by the grace of God, He got me back. I did not save myself. I don't believe
Yeah,
we
yeah.
find Jesus. Jesus finds us. But what's interesting too throughout that experience, I have a friend I made in California. He went to Templo, if you remember Templo de la Cruz. Love that church.
Yeah.
And he told me he was praying for me one time during those 3 years, and he said that God spoke to him, and he said, God told him, he said, what if everything Marcus learns in the world, he's able to bring to the church?
Mm.
And ever since then, now my focus, of course, is Jesus, but I guess I would say overall life tactic is really the union of Jesus and therapy. And
Mm.
because I believe Jesus is the perfect example of that, because he was fully God and fully man. So oftentimes in Christianity, we overall, Big C Church, and I've seen a lot of churches that do this, will somewhat diminish our humanity, making us think it makes us more spiritual. And it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
absolutely not true. Like the primary example is the shortest Bible verse. Jesus wept. Jesus felt his emotions. Jesus
Yeah.
allowed himself to be emotional. So yeah, that's my focal point now. So again, I'm grateful that I had that experience and that it took such a extreme scenario for me to learn that. But now, for me personally, I've never had a better mindset in life than Jesus in therapy, and I've been able to minister to a lot of people throughout the years and just accept people. I feel like I accept people more. I love people better. I understand the human experience more. I understand how our traumas and our past affect who we are, our perspectives, how we
Yeah.
think, how we act, and how Jesus can come into that and clean us up and heal us. Because, like, so I'm very grateful to say that I've been porn free for 5 years,
Mm,
and I
that's what's up.
can't believe I can even say that because that's the grace of God. However, that's the proof in the pudding of the Jesus and therapy mindset, because therapy in itself, I don't believe it heals. I believe it helps to expose.
Yeah.
And really what happened with me was I dug deep into my past and my traumas. I found out things that happened to me as a child that led to a pornography addiction. But I still remember it to this day, is that therapy really helped me to understand that, the root causes of my addiction, but it really helped me to be able to let go of it. And as soon as I let go, Jesus swept in and took it from me. But a big lesson I learned is that God will never take away anything we're not willing to let go.
Mm,
And that's what I was doing all that time in Cali and other things, is I was saying, God, take it away, take it away, take it away. But a very real part of me was holding on to it because it
yeah.
some kind of satisfaction to me. So I had to get to the point where I literally personified my sin. I talked to it. I said, you're a liar. You promised me all these great things, all this pleasure, but you ruined me. You hurt me. You damaged my
Mm.
relationships. You limit my life. I don't want you anymore. And then I literally, bro, I kid you not, I felt it in that moment. And God took that desire, and it's been 5 years.
That's dope. That's dope. That's definitely great to celebrate, to continue going through more and more years. So there's a lot in that. So I want to kind of backtrack. But yeah, well, one, I'll say this. Yeah, I absolutely love the idea of Jesus and therapy. Um, and there's a lot of things that we had to unlearn as well. The idea that there's these super saints that do only ministry versus the people in the secular world, business people, communications that are less than. It's like, nah, that's not true, right? Like that idea was kind of ingrained within us. Um, that, you know what I mean? And so Susie, as you probably know, she's a counselor as well. So definitely big on that. And so a lot of what we do is we try to make the gospel holistic, right? Like, yeah, we want to teach people about Jesus, but we also want to teach them how to do better with their finances, how to do better emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, like all of it. Jesus can heal it, but you also got to do some stuff, right? You can't just keep eating how you're eating and to say God bless the food. You know what I mean? Like we gotta do something too. We got to get to that point where we're willing to let go. But I wanted to ask, as far as like walking away, because and your story is a little bit different. I mean, everyone's story is different in that sense, but what's one thing that maybe the churches can do better? Because you're right. Like if someone's asking you, like, man, how you doing? But sometimes we don't ask those questions, right? Like, so there's one, we're not asking and we're not checking up on our people and seeing how they're really doing, right? Most of the time when people are saying how you doing and you start telling them how you're doing, they're like, they feel uncomfortable. Like that's happened to me where I was going through it, and some people, whether it's at church or friends, are like, man, how you doing? I was like, man, it sucks right now. I'm going through it. They're like, man, that sucks. Yeah, all right, I'll talk to you later. I was like, bro, like you asked me how I'm really doing, and then I tell you, and you don't want to, you know what I mean? You're gonna
Yeah,
pray for me, but you ain't gonna pray for me.
yeah.
But what are some other things that we can do to because there's a lot of people following away because of misconceptions, right? Like that's the idea of like prayer. Um God, I want you to take this away. And then he doesn't take it away, so he's not real. But then, like you were saying, is like we have to be willing. We have to get to that point where we want him to really, whatever that looks like. But what are some other things that you think, at least the church being active? We'll talk about some other things, but the church being active to combat, people walking away. I guess in a sense being lonely, right? Like we're lone rangers. Some of that we do ourselves. Some of it we just we're too busy.
Yeah. Honestly, the first word that pops in my head while you were asking me that is a word that I don't think we focus on enough. We love our word studies, and let's dive into the Greek and Hebrew. This
Yeah.
is a word that definitely needs to be dove into, whatever
Well,
the
yeah.
word.
Well, it sounds good.
And the word is genuine.
Hmm. That's
Like
good.
even
Yeah.
Paul says, let your love for one another be genuine.
Genuine.
Well, what
Hmm.
does genuine mean? It means not forced.
Yeah. That's
It
good.
means not part of the system, the equation, the roles and responsibilities of a Christian. And that's one of my I guess you could say pushbacks to my experience has been that it's been my experience in Christianity has had a lot of um, in my opinion, too formal, too structured of an experience when we're supposed to be people who are just genuinely in love with God.
Hmm.
And
That's good.
we evangelize because we genuinely want to tell other people about Jesus, not because the Great Commission tells us to, not
Hmm.
because our Bible college tells us to, our pastors tell us to. Like,
Or it's a grade.
yeah, or it's a
Yeah.
grade. Yeah. Like I think that's what we miss out when we
That's good.
become too structured is we lose the genuineness. And yeah, I mean, and that part of that too is genuine relationships. Like there's not a lot of genuine relationships in the church. They are hinged upon ministry or yeah, that's my homie because we hit the streets together. Like,
Hmm.
but are you having like genuine conversations with one another? Do you genuinely care about a person? There's a term called like toxic positivity. And I think that's
Oh.
very real in the church
Hmm.
too. So toxic positivity outside of the church is like everything it has a silver lining. There's always some type
Oh,
of good
okay.
behind
Yeah.
stuff to the point where you don't allow people to feel their feelings. So like you said, if you're having a crappy day, you're having a crappy day and that's okay. Not,
Yeah.
oh, well, brother, Jesus died for your sins and we have the mission of saving the world and all these other
Too
things.
stressed to
Like,
be too blessed to be stressed.
correct. Yeah. So you deny people their
Yeah.
humanity. And
Mm.
you get basically two pools of people with that. You turn people off, so you push people away and push people out of the church. Well,
Yeah.
actually, I would say three. You push people away. You have this crazy, crazy, crazy minority of people that are super hyper focused in that ministry and that mission driven mindset. Or the third pool is you get a bunch of liars.
Yeah.
You
You
get
teach them how to
people
lie.
that
Yeah.
will look good on the outside, and like I said, I knew it probably better than most of how to put on the facade and say the right things and do the right things. And then that's what happens is if you're not genuine, then you create an environment of insincerity and where people who are having a crappy day won't admit to them having a crappy day. If they're
Yeah.
having a depressive thought or episode that day, and they don't have an environment and leaders and friends where
Yeah.
they can be open and honest about that, then again, they either get turned off, shut down, or just keep it to themselves. And so I think that's a big thing that we're missing is being very genuine, is allowing people to be human and acknowledging it, not sitting there, not saying, yeah, you're
Exactly.
be depressed the rest of your life. But you can't solve a problem until you first acknowledge it. And by us lacking our acknowledging of our issues, we have people suffering in silence, and then we cover
Yeah.
that with ministry, with all these doing
And
things.
get busy. Yeah. Stay busy.
Yeah, and the doing of Christianity is again supposed to be a genuine result of intimacy and relationship with God and with others. So it's us, even you look at the early church and the disciples and the apostles, like everything they did and all these amazing things were results of their intimacy with God, of literally walking with Jesus.
Yeah.
So you can't expect to do the latter without doing the former. We can't
Yeah.
force ourselves to want to do these big ministries and miracles and healings and all these other things when we lack genuine relationships, which, to be very honest and based on my experience, I truly believe is a reason why we don't see the power of God as much as we could, is
Yeah.
because I believe God's power is channeled and flows through his love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like
Absolutely.
I remember specifically, and again, this is God flowing through me. I am nobody special, but I remember specifically there was one service we had at Templo in California. And I was cool with everybody at the time, with the pastor. They knew I was in SUM, so I kind of had some freedom there. And I remember one service we had a guest speaker, and he called out to the audience and said, if anybody needs healing, come to this part of the stage. So there was a crowd of people that went to this part of the stage. Well, there was this older woman who had a cane, I believe, and she couldn't make it to that part. And I'm like, but gosh, she's right there and she wants it. And you're telling me
Mm.
she's this close and she can't get it. So I was like, forget it. I'll pray for her. So I remember going up to the stage. Like I said, I had some freedom at the time. So I got on the stage, I prayed for her. And dude, I just remember crying so hard.
Mm.
And like I genuinely wanted this woman to be healed. It wasn't so I
Yeah.
can go
Yeah.
back to SUM. It wasn't so I could have a testimony to share on Sunday morning. It wasn't so I could see the power of God at work. It's because in that moment, I genuinely loved a fellow human
Yeah.
being and I wanted what was best for her. And I put my
Yeah.
hands on her and I prayed for her and she started screaming. Like, crap, what did I just do? And she was screaming because God had healed her in that moment and her back and everything had fixed. I think she left without that walker or her cane. She didn't need it anymore. She said God healed her. I remember her coming up onto the stage. I told Pastor John at the time, I was like, God just healed this woman. Can we let her share her story? She shared. She was like, I haven't been able to bend over in like 20 years. And right there
Wow.
in the stage, everybody bends over without issues. Like, so that's what I took from that, is that
Yeah.
the God, we see God through genuine love for one another.
Yeah.
We see everything. You see power, you see effective ministry, you see lives change through genuine love. But the problem is that that's difficult. Genuine
Yeah.
love requires time, requires
Yeah.
effort,
It's messy.
requires, it's messy, perfect, yes.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to do the latter. Well, it's a lot easier to follow a system of let's hit the streets, let's pass out these flyers, let's set up these speakers, let's say X, Y, and Z, let's go walk them through the sinner's prayer, and it becomes too formulated where
Mm.
we
That's
lack
crazy.
the
Yeah.
genuineness. And
That.
people can tell, bro. People know when you're genuine or not. And
Yeah.
so many people, we think we're doing the right thing, hitting the streets, and so many people are like, I don't feel the love. This isn't genuine. It becomes a
Yeah.
and it becomes a job when it's supposed to be a joy.
Yeah. Yeah, I know we're coming at time. I was gonna say this briefly. Me and Herbert were talking about it last time. We were talking about like Bible Belt Christianity, and that was one of the ideas, was that um one thing that I think that we did wrong when we did evangelism is that we didn't, and not all of us, but I mean, when we were on the streets, and we would talk to a lot of people. But when we would walk them to the faith and they would get saved, we didn't continue that relationship, right? It was like, oh man, 20 people gave their life to God. I prayed for them, but where are they at now?
Yep.
You know what I mean? It wasn't a continuation. But like you're saying, if we genuinely want to know them, we want to love them, want to pray, we're gonna be walking through with life with them, continuing after that moment. It has to continue. We, in a sense, have to be spiritual fathers at that point. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And that's missing. You're at time, right?
I mean, I can keep going.
Okay. Well, I just want to be respectful.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, so I did want to ask this question. So what are some things that you wish we would have done better when you were in those 3 years? Because I think I reached out probably once or twice, and then we kind of went back and forth, and I was like, man, I didn't want it to be a debate and fight. You know what I mean? So we just kind of left it at that. I think Herbert, me, Herbert, Vinny, we prayed for you type of thing, or Nan, one of us. But obviously we could have did more, right? But what are some things that you wish people would have done? Because everybody is different, but in general, like, you know what I mean? You're going through it, things suck, and you're at the point where like, man, I don't know if God is really real, right? And obviously you don't want us to tell you, oh well, I can prove it, I can show you the scriptures, I can, all that stuff. That's not what you need. What is what you needed in that time?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for your prayers. I appreciate that, and you guys praying for me. That means a lot. No, because yeah, when I came back, I found out how many people were praying for me, and it was very humbling. So thank you for that. Yeah, man. I think a big part of it is it's just making yourself available, and something that God convicted me on is it's not having expectations. So
Mm,
really, the one thing God convicted me on was that He told me that I wasn't treating people like people. I was treating people like projects.
yeah,
And I always
yeah.
had an end in mind or destination. Well, find some way to work Jesus into the conversation, or
What?
if that's an example or an idea, yeah, turn
Well,
that, the best preachers can make anything into a sermon. And that's how my mindset was. It was always the end goal, the end goal, the end goal. That is not a relationship.
yeah, that's
Relationships do
good.
not have end goals other than just loving the other person. And love has nothing to do with you, it has everything to do with the other person. What does that person need? So that's honestly the probably one of the best advices I can give based on the situation is if you want to genuinely love someone, ask them what they need and do your
Mm,
best to provide it. So some
that's
people
good.
want space,
Yeah.
sucks, but if that's what they need, you need to give it to them.
Yeah.
And of course, if you have a problem with that, not saying you, I'm just saying anybody. If
Yeah.
somebody has
Yeah.
a problem giving somebody what they need, well, then it's more about you than
It's more
actually.
about you. Yeah.
So in that moment, honestly, yeah, like I got honestly some of my best support from some of my non-Christian friends,
Yeah.
and it was consistency, it was availability, and it was just love. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's the absolute wrong approach. Would have been coming with scriptures and hermeneutics, homiletics, all this other fun stuff. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just it's presence. Sometimes, like even if when we seek God, we don't necessarily hear His voice or see visions. Sometimes it's just His presence, and sometimes presence is enough. So that's really what I learned is that like it's respecting people's humanity. It's understanding that everyone is in charge of their own lives. They make their own decisions. They are responsible for their own lives. Their choices need to be respected, whether you disagree with them or not. They need to be respected, and understanding that people will be open to things when they are ready to receive.
That's good. Yeah.
And that's a huge thing. Is that like even my primary example with this also is Peter on the day of Pentecost. He preached the first Christian sermon, and if you notice, Peter just preached and he stopped. He didn't have an altar call.
Yeah.
He just gave the message. And
Yeah.
this is something interesting to pick up on because a big thing that I learned throughout the last few years is unsolicited advice. So you
Mm,
can have the exact answer somebody needs, you can have the truth, but if somebody's not ready to receive it, then it will fall on deaf ears. And the best way you know somebody's ready to receive something is they ask for it. So at the
mm,
end of Peter's sermon, what happened? Someone in the crowd said, "What must I do to be saved?" That means that person was ready to be saved because they asked for it. So Peter just made the truth available. He let people know whoever was there and wanted to listen, they would listen. If somebody wanted to walk away, you need to allow them to walk away. So I think a big
yeah.
part of it is respecting people's autonomy and their humanity and understanding that I'm not you, you're not me, and that I have to respect your journey. Yes, Jesus is the answer. Yes, He is the Savior of all mankind. Yes, there is no salvation outside of. If we want to go through all that, I'm perfectly fine with that. but it needs to be coupled with understanding that we're talking to genuine humans with
Yeah.
genuine problems and who have their own will, who may not be ready to receive information, just like you and I are times where we may know better, but we don't want to be told better. And
Yeah.
there are times where you can be told the same thing over and over and over again, but somehow that 100th time, you're ready to receive it.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that people have to be ready to receive things. And if not, you're not only wasting your time and energy, but that's the best way to disrespect someone, is to give them something they're not asking for, especially repeatedly. And then we guise it with, I'm loving this person, or you need
Yeah.
this, you need the truth. Like, you got to respect people's life and
Yeah.
their will. If God respects our will to the point where he'll allow us to willingly walk away from him, then we have no
Hmm.
excuse.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. So, um, I don't know if I said this earlier, but the same thing, the idea that we do a disservice for people, especially as churches and pastors and leaders, when we just tell people to pray and fast things away. Like, counseling is important, therapy is important, um and sometimes it's more than just, you know what I mean, like we have to dig and do the work. So what are some other things, and we'll end on this, but what are some other things that you think the church can be doing better, or even as your whole stance of therapy and Jesus, what does that look like? You know what I mean? Like, what are some things that the church can do better, but then also some tips that you give to people as they're going through life and they're like, I'm struggling with this type of thing. You can read books, you can watch videos, YouTube, but what are some other things? What does it look like to do therapy and self-care with Jesus?
Yeah. I personally am okay with those two things being handled by separate entities and separate professionals. So
Yeah.
I believe in therapy. I don't believe your therapy needs to come from your pastor. I don't believe it
Yeah.
has to
They're
be from
not
the
trained.
church.
So,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
people are devote their lives to navigate the human psyche. So I've gotten my most healing or most revelation from therapists that have been outside of the church. Now I say that with a caveat: be mindful too, because not everything they say is
Yes.
obviously biblically aligned. So you
Yeah.
still need to go in there and mature and understand that everything, I'm going to have to take this with a grain of salt. I'm not going to always take it at face value. And worst case scenario, if you have a pastor you trust, take what you learn in a therapy session and run it by somebody you trust and has experience. Be like, hey, this is what I was told. Does this make sense? Is this something I should apply to my life? But like I said, it's a union of the two. But yeah, I believe, again, Jesus was that example of being fully God and fully man. So he took care of his relationship with God, and he took care of his humanity as well. He allowed himself to be human. So yeah, I think the overall mindset approach of I'm always careful when I talk about the church, because it's God's bride, and I never want to talk badly about the bride. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I was just saying, like, honestly, for churches to remember that they're serving people, actual people with real lives, real problems, and that people are not projects. Because if you're pouring into your people with the end result of them signing up for ministries, being a part of all these things, then the people aren't your focus. The end results are your focus. So can you get to the point where you're investing in people without, if can you get to the point where you're investing in people and the fruit of that is them growing as an individual, is them being healed of traumas and past, of them genuinely displaying the fruit of the spirit? Because in my humble opinion, that's really the sign that someone is a Christian, is a changed character, and the fruit of the spirit is character. It equates to the character of Jesus. Your character is
Yeah.
love, joy, peace, all that fun stuff. So the result can happen, but they shouldn't be the focus. When you genuinely love and pour
Yeah.
into people, the results become genuine. And you don't have to tell people, we're signing people up for our ministry, we need 5 more people to sign up. No, you get too many people signing up. And you're like, whoa, we don't know what to do with all these volunteers, because your focus is people. And
Yeah.
we can use those words, but the implementation and the practicality of it is missing. We say all day long that we have a relationship with Jesus What is a
Mm.
relationship? It requires time. It requires intimacy. It requires vulnerability. It requires getting deep and letting that other person into your deep and darkness. Are we letting Jesus in our deep dark
Yeah,
spaces?
that's
You know what I mean?
good.
Are we spending time with him? That's not necessarily at church. Jesus tells us to go into our prayer closet and spend one-on-one time with him and the Father who's in secret. Are we, real intimacy? And we always have the comparison of a married couple, a husband and a wife. Intimacy takes place behind closed doors, and
Mm.
it's two becoming one, and nobody else has access to that environment. So it's the same thing with God. Like my intimacy with God, the best times of my life when I'm thriving are when I'm consistently alone with God and sitting in silence and asking Him to speak to me. And that's where so much comes from, because that's truly a relationship, is spending time with a person. So yeah, that's my advice to the churches. Just remind yourselves that you're dealing with real people with real
Yeah.
problems. I have a particular issue with the word use. So when people say God wants to use you, I
Mm.
do not like that statement whatsoever, because there are certain people in the audience and in the church that are like, well, my job uses me, my kids
Mm.
use me, my spouse uses me, and now God wants to use me. And
Mm.
again, if you want to use something, it's results driven. You use something for a purpose. People
Mhm.
are the purpose. People
Yeah.
are the mission. Love is the mission. Loving God and loving others is the fulfillment of the law. And love, when it's genuine, love is patient, it's kind. We have the definitions of it, but it's this union of
Yeah.
emotions and logic. It's not either or. Like it is that simple. Just love people genuinely, and God does the rest.
Yeah. So, so is there anything that you want to say as far as like your business or anything else, how they can find you? I think you were starting to work on music again, right?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. So any last thoughts that you want to share about what you're doing, how they can find you, or what you're up to as well?
Sure. Yeah. So what's really cool is I took my evangelism experience and I learned a lot of communication skills from that. How to talk to people, how to listen, how to not make assumptions. I made a lot of assumptions about people on the streets and
Yeah.
have ruined conversations because of that. So I turned my communication skills. I actually was blessed with the opportunity to give a TED talk about 4.5, 5 years ago now. It's about to hit 500,000 views online.
Nice.
It's actually being used by professors and universities around the world. So I turned it into a business called Better Communication. My website is beabettercommunicator.com. So I turned my experience into an online training. I would suggest for if somebody wants to work on their communication skills, especially when it comes to preaching the gospel, please check out the website. It is a 2-hour masterclass training on effective communication. It will help you understand how to become a better communicator. And it's not just tips and tricks, it's getting to the heart of the issue. It's understanding who you are as a person. There's a lot of psychology in there as well. But yeah, beabettercommunicator.com. You can send me an email at Marcus, Marcus, at beabettercommunicator.com. And yeah, I'm working on a lot of new music. I'm excited about that as well. I actually just had a listening party a couple weeks ago. I played 9 new songs for about 30 people in attendance. They rated it. They gave me their feedback because I wanted to know a core group of people who are really focused on music. I wanted their feedback before I released it to
Nice.
the general public. So yeah, man, a lot of good things happening.
Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah, I definitely appreciate your time. I appreciate you being vulnerable and then talking about your experience, but then also giving some great tips of what we can do better to love people, right? Like that's really, like you said, that's what it's about. If only the church would focus on that, like the whole world would probably be different. Not everyone, but for a good portion of them, right? Like things would be different. I think people would not be leaving the church as often as they are because they're feeling like they're loved, right? They're trying to find love, they're trying to find acceptance, they're trying to find people who have their back. So yeah, I definitely appreciate it. We'll see about maybe in the future about doing some other stuff. There's a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
you talked about that we
You're gonna
can.
bring me on for a part 2? I'm down.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I gotta think about what it is. We might even have you, me, Herbert, do some stuff too, and just kind of like talk about I don't know whatever. We'll figure out the topics and then make it happen.
I would love that.
But But yeah, I appreciate you, and everyone until next time. Peace.